Hello and welcome back to round 2 of the Liverpool Regionals here. My name is Jamie Boyt and I'm going to be joined by Ben Kiriakou, and we've already had such a fantastic game in that first game featuring Eric Rios, of course, and we're going to be going to another fantastic game in this round too.
Exactly that. We have two players that are both historically very well accomplished, but also are two players that have been real standouts in the VGC community. We have Lee Provost versus David Koutesh.
Yeah, two fantastic players. Very veteran players, I think is fair to say as well. They've been around for a while and have some great accomplishments behind their belts. Of course, in the most recent World Championships, David Koutesh bringing that fantastic, very creative Liverpool Dialga team as well. And Lee Provost as well, no strangers to the World Championships, getting that top 8, but all the way back in 2014.
Yeah, and actually been playing since 2009, I believe. So when we talk about veterans, yeah, Lee is definitely top of the list there. He's such a fantastic player, and he brings his own spin to every format that he plays every single year.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of taking your own spin to it, I think that David Koutesh has a very unique style when it comes to team building, getting some very creative choices all throughout the formats that he has been previously competing in.
And I think one of the things that stands out to the way that David builds is, sometimes you look at the teams that David comes to tournaments with, and, Liverpool Dialga, like, who would have thought of that in 2020 season at all?
Yeah.
But the way that he approaches it is always the other way around. He doesn't start with, the Pokemon that are a little bit different, or the players that the sort of Pokemon that you wouldn't expect. He actually finishes off with those sort of Pokemon and uses the niches that he needs to round out a team.
Yeah, it's really nice to see. A lot of players do go for, these are Pokemon that are top of the meta. They are going to be classically very good and generally will be able to fit on most teams.
Yeah.
But then you get those more niche picks that are maybe not so slappable onto a team, but fit the niche that you need, the hole in the team, absolutely perfectly.
They do, and I think that's a real skill in team building and something that all of you trainers back at home can really start to think about as you watch more of these games and see what's sort of working and what's not, is to really look at what Pokemon that you're struggling with when you're testing those games, when you're online playing, or even just playing with your friends. Always be thinking about what exactly you need a particular Pokemon slot to do and what Pokemon really does fulfill that role.
Yeah, maybe a Pokemon that really hasn't seen any success so far throughout the season, but may just be that niche pick that is absolutely perfect for your team. And I'm hoping that we are going to be seeing that as we're going into this tournament. Obviously, we are quite new in the meta at the moment. We've only had one regional so far back in San Diego, but yeah, I'm hoping for some very interesting picks coming out from David, because he's really delivered in the past. I'm really hoping he does in this one as well.
I'm sure he absolutely will, as David's a player that plays so much Pokemon. But speaking of the only other regional that we've had, San Diego featured in the top cut one of your favorite Pokemon, JB Salazzle.
Yeah, Salazzle, absolutely a brilliant Pokemon in this format. Maybe not so good in Generation 8. I will accept that. But it is going to be a very good Pokemon going into this format for sure. Fake Out is now a lot more viable than it was in the previous one, because obviously you couldn't fake out a Dynamax Pokemon. Everything can be faked out here, apart from the Covert Cloak Pokemon that are going to be sneaking around. But yeah, Salazzle is going to be a very good Pokemon going into this format for sure.
One of the things that really helps you with that, though, is the open team sheets that these players will be playing with. So every trainer that's going to be facing off against each other will know at least mostly what their opponent's going to be bringing, and is going to be able to see things like where that Covert Cloak is, what Terra Pokemon are going to be, what Terra type Pokemon are going to be opting for in their opposing teams.
Yeah, is very different in previous formats. Maybe when you're having those niche picks, it may be a little bit of a surprise to your opponent in, oh, I didn't actually realize this Pokemon was going to go for this move or have this item or whatever it's going to be. And the open team sheet format does definitely take away from that. It is a slightly different skill to be able to build creatively in the open team sheet format when your opponent is going to know exactly what is this Pokemon going to do.
And I think it's, in previous formats a lot of the time, and I think, it's easy to think, oh, okay, so, these sort of more interesting teams that have developed slightly differently, win game 1, and then, hey, you've got like 2 opportunities to win game 2 and 3, right? But I think especially in these open team sheet formats, it's those sort of sideline picks that they work for game 1, but actually, do you know what? If your opponent knows that they're coming, they still work equally as well for game 2 and 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do want to be building with the entire tournament in mind. Maybe you'll get a niche pick that steals one game, and that might be exactly what that pick was for. But if you can build from the entire format and make sure that that decision is still going to be impactful across the entirety of the games that you can play, that's going to be the most effective that you can be.
Definitely. One of the things I think really stands out for me on that, and actually we talked about it a little bit with Eric in the last round when we managed to speak to him after he won the set, was Curse on Mimikyu as an answer to Dondozo Tatsugiri combination that's been so prevalent already. We always knew it was going to be right from the start. It proved that we were right in this particular assumption straight off the bat. But that Curse, it's like a little bit of a mind game. It's like, well, Gilberto, who Eric was playing against, didn't bring the Dondozo because of the Curse on Mimikyu and other things. Maybe they would have lost game 1 to a Curse previously, but hey, it's still a great move against that combination.
Yeah, absolutely. If it was a closed team sheet format, then maybe you would be bringing that Dondozo immediately. You don't know there's Curse on the Mimikyu. The Mimikyu that won the regional championships back in San Diego did not have Curse.
Nope.
It would be a reasonable assumption that it did not, but is a perfect tech to be able to take care of the Dondozos, even so much that it wasn't even brought to the game.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that really does raise the quality up of play in this sort of tournament, because you can look at your opponent's team sheet. When you've been studying your own matchups, when you've been playing and practicing back at home prior to the tournament, prior to coming in, you kind of know what you're looking for in your opponent's team to be like, oh, okay, right, that's that one. Right, don't want to do this now because your opponent has got a particular tech or a particular way of dealing with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the practice that is going to be going into this format does tend to be that closed team sheet effectively on the in-game ladder. You don't get to see your opponent's team when you're laddering in games, so, and that is also best of one. So being able to factor that into expanding out your team building into a best of 3 format while the opponent still knows what is going to be your techs on your team is going to be very important going forward into this format.
It really is, and Pokemon's always been a game of community, always been a game of friendships and making sure that you're working with a group of like-minded people that can really challenge you to make the best teams possible, and also challenge your play and punish you for the mistakes that you make when you get a little bit lazy in practice. But and that's never been more important with these open team sheet formats, because as you said, Jamie, we can't practice as effectively as once we could.
Yeah, we do have to rely on the maybe team building partners a bit more for that practice. That's really the only effective way of getting that best of 3 practice with the open team sheet. And I think a lot of players going into this new format that maybe have played previous formats may be so used to the fact that the tournaments are going to be closed team sheet that their practice would have been orientated to that in previous formats and in previous years, and now they're going to have to adjust their practice, not even the building for the tournament, maybe not even their tournament practice as well. It's even just the fact that they weren't previously building for the closed team sheet, and now even the practice is going to be affected.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a really big thing to be able to deal with, and especially moving into new games where there's new mechanics, there's new Pokemon, there's new effects, there's new moves, there's new everything that we all have to really get our heads around, and that's a lot in itself just to practice with, let alone the type of format that we're playing.
Yeah, and you have to factor in the fact that a Pokemon could be every single type now as well. And that's going to just compound as well with the amount of things that you could be seeing in a tournament. Obviously, there's going to be more effective Terra types on certain Pokemon. You may not be expecting to see certain types as well. You can make reasonable assumptions, but you are not going to know. There's going to be quite a few reasonable types on each Pokemon.
Yeah, and one of those sort of ways that type sort of shakes out, one of my favorite is Annihilate versus Sylveon, where you see the Annihilates typically go for a Terra Fire to make sure that they're resisting that hyper voice coming out from the Sylveon, but sometimes then to be able to respond with Rage Fist, and then okay, the Annihilate's going to be taking those hits, and then the Sylveon changes into Terra Water just to be able to make sure it's getting those hits off. And it's just a really nice little sort of cycle of how players have evolved in this metagame already.
It's going to continue to evolve. Maybe the Terra Water Sylveon is going to be able to counter the Annihilate, but then the Annihilate, now expecting the Terra Waters instead of usually the Terra Fire on the Sylveon, may adapt into a different type, and then because of that, it would adapt into a different type. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the meta develops in that regards. Not even just the Pokemon that's used, the Terra typing that is used on the Pokemon as well is going to be evolving because of the counters, and now the counters to the counters, and so on and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and whether trainers decide to play it defensively or offensively. I mean, a lot of what we saw already is that players have been starting as the tournaments have started, as these sort of long rounds and playing several best of threes, playing a little bit more defensively with their Terra, making sure they get just that one more turn rather than increasing their power using the same type as they were naturally gifted with to just increase that damage output instead.
Yeah, you do get a few Pokemon that really do want to be going for that offensive Terra type, but I would say that the vast majority of the Pokemon that I've seen have been some kind of defensive Terra type, and that seems to be what trainers are opting for a lot more commonly, because being able to suddenly resist a hit that would have just maybe even just straight up knocked you out in one shot is going to be very, very important for the Pokemon.
It really is. We can see now these players are getting ready, so let's highlight again. We have, if you've just joined us, Lee Provost versus David Koutesh up against each other in this round 2 of the Liverpool Regional Championships.
Yeah, we've got some excellent teams coming out from both of these players as well. We're going to be seeing a Torkoal and a Litigant coming out from David Koutesh. That is a duo that was effective back in VGC 17. It's going to be doing exactly the same thing it wants to do. It wants to go for those after use into the eruptions. It wants to be clicking the sleep powders, get those sleep moves off, because Litigant can be very, very fast in the sun.
It really, really can, but one thing in terms of the matchup that we have in Lee's favor is that we have a Pokemon that's been around since the beginning of VGC Tyranitar, which brings that sand. So I think maybe David probably coming to this tournament not expecting to see too much weather, maybe seeing the odd Pelipper, etc., but maybe not expecting to see that Tyranitar.
Yeah, and we've also got the Pokemon that makes use of the weather as well on these sides. He's got that Lycanroc that has the Sand Rush, so it's going to be able to be super fast in the sand. So we've got a true weather war here. So it's going to be really good to see, because you've got that Litigant Torkoal. The Litigant wants to be in the sun to be super fast, and the Lycanroc wants to be in the sand to be super fast. Although Lycanroc is pretty speedy anyway. Yeah,
it's one of those Pokemon. In fact, if I remember rightly, Lee and I were having a little bit of chat about the team that he's using today in the last couple of days, and Lycanroc is 1 speed point faster than Pokemon like Mousehold, which I think is a really interesting way to look at a Pokemon. Sometimes you can get tunnel visioned into Pokemon like Lycanroc or Ludicolo, or other Pokemon that have those Swift Swim, Sand Rush abilities, etc. But actually sometimes they're just quite good as Pokemon on their own, and seeing them for their own merits without the weather that helps them out is really important, I think, when it comes to building.
Yeah, I think Lycanroc probably gets away with not being in the sand a bit more than Litigant gets away with not being in the sun. Because Litigant, it's reasonably fast, but Lycanroc is significantly fast. So Litigant really does want to be in the sun. It will outspeed everything, basically, unless there's any kind of speed control, if it is in that sun. So, and it definitely on Lee's side of the field, the Litigant will outspeed actually a reasonable amount of Pokemon without the sun anyway. The Tyranitar is going to be pretty slow, so it should be outspeeding that and threatening pretty effectively. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how, if even the trainers are going to be opting in for, I would assume they're going to bring the Torkoal and the Tyranitar. Usually you do want to opt into the weather war so that you can counter the opposing weather.
Yeah.
It just depends on whether the Pokemon that actually makes use of the weather is coming to the match as well.
And I think that's going to be quite interesting, because, you mentioned the sleep powders earlier coming out from Pokemon like Lilligant, especially boosted by the sun. But there is Mousehold on Lee's side of the field, and it looks like it's holding a pair of specs that may stop it from being quite as affected by those sleep powders.
Yeah, usually the safety goggles is going to be used for Amoonguss. That is the main Pokemon you'd want to be countering, but obviously all the powder moves are going to be immune when it is carrying that, and that is including the sleep powder as well. So that's going to be very effective against the Litigant. It's going to redirect the sleep powders and not care about it at all. It will also redirect any after use, so that if you want to be going for that very unique form of speed control with the after use to get the eruptions immediately, you can't do that. The Mousehold's still going to redirect it.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe it's going to use Follow Me a little bit quicker.
Potentially.
We'll have to see, but yeah, it's going to be quite interesting to see how those two particular weather combinations really come up against each other. In the context, of course, that we have a Dondozo and Tatsugiri on David's side of the field as well.
A classic pairing. Liligan and Torkoal is also very classic, but I think maybe in this format, Dondozo and Tatsugiri is seen a little bit more often, but still going to be very effective here. And the fact that you have effectively two combinations that do want to be together, you need to prepare for both. But maybe you're not going to be able to. Tatsugiri and Dondozo perform entirely differently to Torkoal and Lilligant. So if you prepare for one, like maybe if Lee is bringing his counter to Torkoal and Lilligant, and then Dondozo is on the field instead, that could be quite detrimental. Yeah,
and it's definitely something that you have to be playing mind games. And I really like that's a way that David has structured his team there to be able to, use those combinations effectively. And follow it up with some Pokemon that are really quite good at cleaning up the field. Once Tatsugiri and Dondozo have done their thing, or once Lilligant and Torkoal have either cleared the way or are staying in the back ready to clear the way, there's a couple of Pokemon there on David's side of the field, Dragonite and Goldengo, which are holding Choice Band and Choice Specs respectively.
Yeah, you want to be maximizing your damage output as much as possible, really committing hard with that Choice Band and the Choice Specs. Not uncommon items in the slightest on those two Pokemon. Choice Specs is going to be able to enable that Make It Rain to do a lot of damage to both Pokemon, and Choice Band Extreme Speed is going to be doing significant damage to both Pokemon, to one Pokemon as well, but very, very fast.
Exactly, and yeah, I think it's going to be quite telling about how those Pokemon specifically really round out the way that David's playing the game, because you can get started with them and do a lot of damage, break some holes, maybe knock out the checks that you have to Dondozo Tatsugiri or Lilligant Torkoal, and then they come in the back when there's nothing left to be able to stop them, and they just go and do their thing.
Yeah, they absolutely can. And it may even be the opposite. Maybe you're committing to the Dondozo and Tatsugiri straight away, and then you do enough damage to then put them into range of Dragonite and Goldengo. So it can absolutely work the other way as well, and it's going to be very, very tricky to be able to face that. So yeah, that's going to be, I think it's very smart team building coming out from David.
It is, and of course we've got a little bit more of a good stuff kind of composition there for Lee. He's got the Rotom Heat, he's got that Tyranitar. That Tyranitar is holding an Assault Vest, and so it's going to be able to shrug off really anything that comes out from the even the Goldengo, actually, thinking about it, especially if it does go for its Terra, changes its type to Flying, that would make it not weak to something like Make It Rain coming out from the Goldengo. So there's a lot of options there from Lee's side of the field. It's not just that Tyranitar Lycanroc that are combination that I think really leads the team. There's the Annihilate, the Mousehold. They're going to be putting on a lot of pressure. And of course, just nice, solid Pokemon to round out the composition there for Lee.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been talking about combinations. We haven't even mentioned that Mousehold and Annihilate is a combination in itself. You're going to be able to beat up the Annihilate, get that Rage Fist going really, really strong straight away, increasing the damage output really, really significantly.
It is, and yeah, it's a move that increases its damage every single time that Pokemon Annihilate gets hit. And of course, it stays when you switch out, so you can, set it up in the early game, you can bring it out. Maybe you can just use the Mousehold to protect it by redirecting attacks, and then just keep going for that Rage Fist, because at some point, it doesn't matter if you're resisting the hit or not. That Rage Fist is just too powerful.
And I think one thing to mention as well, going up against the Dondozo, usually run unaware, so it's going to ignore any stat boosts. Rage Fist increasing its damage output is not a stat boost. It's still going to be able to increase the damage output against the opposing Dondozo, so that might be a way that could be breaking through that.
It could be, and if that Annihilate does get set up and it gets that beat up going, and potentially is strong enough to be able to survive those hits from Dondozo, which, to be honest, with Annihilate being the Pokemon that it is and such a bulky, naturally bulky Pokemon, it usually is able to take hits. That Dondozo's really got to start being scared.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be the Gastrodon as well on the side of the field. That is a very one of the best counters to Dondozo there could be, because it's going to be immune to the wave crashes that could be coming out. If you do give it the Terra typing of Fairy, it's immune to the Order Ups. It does appear to be Grass type on this Gastrodon, so going to be able to take the Earthquakes a bit better that could be coming out from the Dondozo.
Yeah, and you can see it up on the screen there. Both of these players at 1-0 in this tournament. David on the left, Lee on the right. David with some great accomplishments there. We were talking about how well David has performed over the years. Top 16 in the World Championships with that Evoltal Dialga team that you mentioned earlier. The Jönköping Regionals runner-up in 2019. Prague Special Event champion in 2018. And 2017, the Austrian Open champion to boot.
Yeah, and so that was maybe a little bit more recent than Lee's accomplishments, but then Lee is going to be one of the players that's been playing for maybe the longest at this point, or going to be up there at least, because he's been back, like you said, in 2009. Some great accomplishments there. World's top 8 in 2014, so still going very strong 9 years later from that. And he has done pretty successfully at the regional champions as well. Back in 2018, he was the runner-up.
He was indeed. Both tournaments I was at, actually, that were great showings from him, and definitely showcased the way that he likes to play the game, which is make sure he's got nice, consistent Pokemon to work with, and make sure that he pilots them in such a way that really play to all of the strengths of those Pokemon. Yeah,
and so got some very, very strong Pokemon there. Classically, Pokemon that were very good in previous formats, like the Rotom Heat and the Gastron, is a very good pairing in itself. You've got the Storm Drain to protect the Rotoms from water types. You've got the Rotoms to protect the Gastron from the grass type. So previously very good Pokemon together, with the combination of the Mousehold and the Nihilate, the brand new Pokemon that is also a very good combination.
It is, and we've got team previews coming up for these players. We've already had a good opportunity to, discuss them in quite a lot of detail, but for those of you that are just tuning in, we'll be getting those up on the screen, so you know what's coming in these open team sheet formats.
Yeah, you absolutely do, and it's going to be interesting to see what the leads are going to be coming out here, because you do need to prepare for the combinations that come out. So you've got two combinations in the Mousehold and the Annihilate on Lee's side of the field. You've got the combination of the Tyranitar and Lycanroc up against the opposing Lilligant and Torkoal, or potentially Tatsugiri and Dondozo. So you're going to have to try and do your best to prepare for everything. Going to be very tricky.
It is, and actually a combination that we didn't really mention, but it's kind of a combination. Gastrodon and Rotom Heat. Gastrodon taking away all of those water-type attacks, and actually really quite relevant, I think, in this part of the format, where we've seen the rise of rain teams. We saw in the last round, a Pelipper came out. No Palafin, unfortunately, for us to witness going from zero to hero. But Gastrodon kind of shuts it down straight away.
Yeah, it does, and that might be an adaptation that's coming out from the Dondozo. This Dondozo is not going to be carrying Wave Crash at all, so doesn't even need to contend with the Storm Drain that's coming out from the Gastrodon. Tatsugiri may need to. It can't go for those Muddy Waters or Hydro Pumps that it would very much like to go for, but you would expect the Wave Crash would be one of the main moves to run on Dondozo, but opting for the extra coverage here instead.
Indeed, and speaking of Dondozo, one of the things that we didn't talk about earlier was that Chesto Rest set, being able to help it recover a lot of its health back. Chesto making sure that it can wake up from something like an Amoonguss if that was on the opposing side of the field, but also just wake up from a rest really quickly. So really like that way of playing from David here, making sure that Dondozo is going to be on the field for as long as possible.
Yeah, Resto Chesto was the item of choice in the Dondozo that was runner-up in San Diego, so very good choice here. Now you can see Lee's team coming out here. You've got we did have the choice specs on both players' teams as well. We've got the Rotom Heat going to be going for the choice specs, so really committing to that damage output. Like you said, you've got the Tyranitar that's going to be holding the Assault Vest, going to be so bulky in the sands that is going to be giving that special defense boost as well.
It is, and even if you change to that flying type, the Assault Vest kind of maintains your sand boost, so to speak, which is a really nice way to go. A recover on the Gastrodon as well, so both water types of sorts have access to some recovery. I think that's going to be potentially quite important in this matchup. And as you mentioned there, the choice specs coming out from that Rotom, that's going to be doing so much damage, and going to have to, I think it's going to have to make that Golden Go and the Torkoal pretty worried about being out in front of it.
Yeah, I think the Rotom is maybe even better in going into this, but with the fact that there's the Dondozo that is going to be the Flying Terror type as well, and no Wave Crash, Rotom is actually pretty free to just be the counter to Dondozo as well. And it's very interesting having that Fairy typing with the Terra Blast for that extra coverage to be able to hit any of the dragons that could be coming out. like the Dragonite.
Exactly. That Dragonite is going to be having that multi-scale ability, so no inner focus would be susceptible to Intimidate if Lee had that on his side of the field. Unfortunately not, nor any fake out either, so definitely multi-scale the ability of choice here in the matchup for David.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be able to shrug off any attack that we would want to be going for, especially even something like a Rage Fist that would be doing so much damage. It would just be able to shrug that off with the multi-scale. There's always that toss-up between the inner focus that immune to flinches and intimidates, but the multi-scale are going to be the move, the item ability of choice there. That's the one I'm looking for. We are jumping into the match right now, so we don't actually have a combo as such. We've got the Rotom, we've got the Mousehold coming out for Lee's side of the field. You would expect the Mousehold to be paired with the Annihilate. Not going to be. It's going to be the Rotom against the opposing Golden Goat and the Lilligant as well. So we were saying the Lilligants probably needed the Sun to be able to be effective, but there's no Sun right now.
No, not at all, but there can always be Sun in the back, and that's something that we saw, especially back in 2017. Lilligant was on the field. There wasn't a Torkoal, but oh, wait, hold on just a moment. Torkoal's coming in the wings.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Mousehold being on the field is going to be very, very effective against that opposing Lilligant. It's not going to be able to safely go for any sleep powders. It would very much want to go for it into the Rotom Heat, but maybe not going to be able to do that. It'd be very brave if he does.
No, indeed. Dragonite coming in for David there. Mousehold going for a Protect, just making sure it's not taking any damage here. And what a call from David coming out there. Going for the sleep powder into that Rotom, and it does connect. Rotom is going to be taking a nap.
Yeah, absolutely. I said it would be very brave, and it was absolutely the correct play. The Mousehold going for the Protect. That could have gone for the Follow Me there, especially because the Golden Goat didn't go for an attack that turn. It did switch into the Dragonite to reposition there, so that was a potentially free turn for Lee. If he would have just gone for the Follow Me, Rotom could have gone for whatever it wanted to that turn, and now it was not able to. So now it's stuck on the field sleeping. You've got to try and wake up. If you wanted to Volt Switch out, you've got to play with sleep turns. You could still hard switch out, but you want to be doing that damage as well. You want to be breaking the Focus Sash or the multi-scale that's on the Dragonite, so going for the attack would be the most effective thing. At least the Mousehold would be able to. It doesn't particularly need to go for Follow Me in the face of any of the sleep powders that are coming out. That could have broken any of the Focus Sash or multi-scale, but it's not going to be here. It's going to be switching out into Tyranitar instead.
No Follow Me whatsoever. And I like the Tyranitar coming in here because that Sandstream is going to break that multi-scale on the Dragonite unless there is another Pokemon that comes in for David's side of the field, but none of that. We're just going to be seeing an Outrage. Oh my god, a critical hit coming out into Tyranitar on the switch-in is going to be a one-hit knockout there. Rotom still counting its sleep turns. I believe we saw a Lilligant going for a sleep powder into the Rotom slot, trying to catch that switch out into something else from David's side of the field, but alas, the Rotom stayed on the field. But wow.
Yeah.
What an outrage.
Massive critical hit there. Being able to take out the Tyranitar. We were saying it was so bulky on the special side, but not particularly on the physical side. It's going to be pretty reasonable, but not with that critical hit choice band Outrage. That is a huge amount of damage. One hit knockout and taking care of that Weather War. If there is the Torkoal waiting in the back, the Weather War has already been won. So very, very good play coming out there for David. The multi-scale and the Focus Sash have been broken at least, so the Mousehold going for an attack would have broken at least one Focus Sash. Switching in the Tyranitar broke both of them, the Focus Sash and the multi-scale, but at the cost of the Tyranitar itself. Maybe you'd have preferred that the Mousehold went down there to the Choice Banded Outrage, because now the Mousehold's still going to be able to support, and the Rotom is likely to wake up this turn. It still is not guaranteed, but it's getting closer and closer to the wake up. But that is a lot of damage that's been taken off of Lee's side of the field already.
It has indeed, but no damage from the Outrage at least going to be coming out onto the Rotom this time as it goes for its Terror into the Fairy type. So resisting, or being immune, should I say, to the Outrage that David has locked its way into. And I think wise Protect coming out from the Mousehold here.
Yeah, absolutely. That means that Outrage cannot do anything this turn at all because you've got the Fairy type and you've got Protecting Pokemon.
No, exactly that. Leaf Storm does go into the Protect on the Mousehold, and Outrage does target down the Rotom. I believe Outrage is sort of a little bit more random in the way that it targets, but most importantly, Rotom is no longer taking a nap and gets that Overheat out onto the Lilligant. So, yeah, okay, David may have won the Weather War, but now there's no abusers in sight.
Yeah, absolutely. If there was the Torkoal waiting in the back, at least the Rotom is now a Fairy type, so the Fire type attacks would do a lot more damage to the opposing Rotom. But that Dragonite as effective as that turn was getting the KO on the Tyranitar, it's still in a reasonably awkward position at this point. Like you said, the Outrage is a random choice move. You don't necessarily need to follow me here. That would guarantee it would go into the Mouse Hold. You probably want the Outrage to be going into the Rotom at this point. But now you turn into the Fairy type. Again, incredibly awkward. Golden Go has just hit the field. You previously resisted the Make It Rain 4 times, and now you are weak to it. So if the Golden Go is going to be able to outspeed the opposing Rotom, that will probably be able to pick up a knockout, even with the Friend Guard from the Mouse Hold. So maybe it's going to come down to the speed tiers of the Rotom and the Golden Go, because even with the choice specs at the -2, you'd probably be doing some significant damage to the Golden Go. So it's going to be important which moves first here.
And it's going to be the Mouse Hold getting started there. No wide lens on the Mouse Hold, just 3 hits on the Population Bomb, and an Outrage does land its mark into the Mouse Hold. Going to be able to knock it out in 1 hit. Overheat following up from the Rotom, even with that choice specs, isn't quite enough to pick up the KO there on this Golden Go and Make It Rain. Single target, no Friend Guard, no problem. The Rotom is going to be going back to Lee.
Yeah, absolutely. The choice specs very effective there coming out from the Golden Go. I think that might have KO'd 2 of those Fairy type Rotoms there. But yeah, the fact that the Rotom moved first, very crucial. But that -2 drop previously from the overheats did come back and allow that Golden Go to be able to survive that. The Lilligants, it was necessary to click the overheat to be able to KO that Pokemon. No other move would have been able to do that. Terra Blast probably not going to be able to pick up the KO. That means you have to commit to getting that -2 drop, which means that the Golden Go is now able to survive. And now with the Annihilape as Lee's last Pokemon here, you've got no Rage Fist built up at all, so you're not going to be doing as much damage as you would have done previously. At least the Golden Go has taken so much damage it would be in range of even just the regular Rage Fist with no boosts. But yeah, it's still going to be very awkward for Lee's side of the field, especially because that Golden Go can now just switch out, switch back in, and reset itself into Shadow Ball instead.
Yeah, and see what Tatsugiri does in the meantime, coming in to take a Rage Fist from that Annihilape. As you said, Jamie, not boosted up, and so not doing too much damage whatsoever as the Outrage. And you know what? This Dragonite has been taking its vitamins.
Yeah, absolutely. You were saying not too much damage, and then Dragonite said, nope, I want all the damage here. That is so much damage coming out from that Outrage. Finally going to confuse itself, but does not matter at this point because you've already taken care of all of the Pokemon on Lee's side of the field. So a really, really smart decision to go for that Outrage.
Yeah, and I like the fact that the Tatsugiri was in the background there for David. And one of the interesting things, we didn't mention it when we were talking about their teams, was that in that match, as well as in David's team, there are all 3 choice items. And so we have the choice band on the Dragonite, we have the choice specs on the Golden Go, and we have the choice scarf on the Tatsugiri. So we saw all of those come to the game as they say, well, hang on a second, I only need 1 move of Pokemon.
Yeah, absolutely. And apparently you only need 1 of the cores of each of the ones that David has on the field. No Torkoal came to that match. No Dondozo came to that match. So Lilligant came without its partner, and Tatsugiri came without its partner as well, but not necessary in the slightest. The Dragonite was just putting out so much damage with that choice banded Outrage. I was going to say there was no Dragon Resist on Lee's side of the field. There ended up being because of the Terra, but that still wasn't enough.
No, and I think one of the most difficult parts there is that once the Rotom had used that overheat, the Golden Go came onto the field when it was a little bit more safe. But it was supported by the Mouse Hold that wasn't able to do any damage to that Golden Go. We saw it live on maybe 20% of its health left. And most Pokemon on Lee's side of the field would have been able to do that last little 20%, even if it was a resisted hit, to that Golden Go, except for Mouse Hold.
Yeah, it does have access to Beat Up, but that really does no damage. The important bit is that the Beat Up does no damage, because you're attacking yourself most likely with the Beat Up.
Yeah.
It would have still just done maybe like 2 or 3 damage to the opposing Pokemon, and some Pokemon had been KO'd on Lee's side of the field already, so the Beat Up would become even less and less powerful, so that wasn't going to be enough. So yeah, maybe bring in the Annihilape instead of the Mouse Holds, depending on the speed tiers. If the Annihilape was able to outspeed and just go for the Rage Fist before the Golden Go would attack, that may have been a bit more effective. But Mouse Hold there, the Friend Guard is very nice, and being able to redirect, especially the Lilligants, would have been very good. That didn't happen on that first turn. That would have been very crucial if the Rotom would have just gone on the offensive and Follow Me had been clicked instead of Protect, because that was an incredibly brave Sleep Powder. To be able to go for Sleep Powder in the face of a Safety Goggles redirection Pokemon, very, very strong play coming out from David on that first turn.
So, speaking of going into Game 2, Jamie, what are your thoughts on, how Lee can adjust going into Game 2? We already mentioned the Annihilape coming out early, but Do you think that it needs to be coming alongside that mouse hold, or do you think there's a different strategy there?
Yeah, I think the mouse holds, it may even seem somewhat necessary, because it's so good against the opposing Lilligants. It just didn't do what it was supposed to in that first game. It needed to follow me on a sleep powder, and that didn't happen in that first game. If it does happen in this game, then that's going to be a lot more effective. Friend Guard is going to be a very useful ability coming into any game, going to be able to protect your Pokemon quite well. But if you do bring that mouse hold, like we saw, there was almost no damage output. Usually you see a lot of damage with the wide lens population bomb. This is a Friend Guard safety goggles mouse hold, so the population bomb's not guaranteed to hit as much as they would with the wide lens, and not going to be doing as much damage because it's not technician. So mouse hold is going to be very good against the opposing Lilligant, and Lilligant was still effective in that game, but it may not be so effective against the rest of the team.
Yeah, and I think that's the real balance that you have to strike here, because that Friend Guard making sure that Pokemon like Annihilate probably would have survived something like an Outrage coming out from Dragonite on David's side of the field. Certainly the Tyranitar may have been able to as well. We don't know quite how much damage that Outrage would have done without the critical hit. I mean, Tyranitar is a naturally very bulky Pokemon, but so is Annihilate. So, we don't quite know where those lines are depending on how these trainers have trained their Pokemon.
Yeah, absolutely. Outrage, a very interesting choice. We've seen players opt for Dragonclaw in previous tournaments as well, because Dragonclaw more consistent, because you are able to choose the choice of Pokemon that you're going to be targeting. But when you get it right with Outrage, or when Outrage gets it right, I should say, then it's going to be way more effective. It's going to be doing so much more damage, as you just saw. It was just able to knock out. I was not expecting an Annihilate to go down in one hit. A Tyranitar might probably survive, but we don't know with a critical hit. But yeah, it's just so much damage, and a very, very risky choice of move over the Dragonclaw, but when it can be effective, we've just seen what it can do.
Yeah, I wonder if David, when he's been preparing for this tournament, has been feeding sandwiches to the Dragonite. We're target the right slot. And just make sure it's going into the right place. We'll have to see, if we get that Dragonite coming back out again, because we didn't see it in the lead in the last game. We saw the Golden Go and the Lilligant coming out for David. We'll have to see if that is going to be the same. No, we're going to be seeing the Dragonite and the Golden Go coming out for David, and the Annihilate Mousehold combination for Lee.
So it seems that Lee has gone with a combo at this point. We've got that Mousehold, we've got that Annihilate. So it's going to be able to go for the beat up immediately, get some really powerful Rage Fists into the opposing Golden Go. You don't need to go for a follow me this turn, because there's no Lilligant on David's side of the field, so you don't need to worry about that at all. You can go for your beat up strategy. You just then need to contend with, which is going to be going first, the Golden Go or the Annihilate. And also, do you go for Make It Rain, because you want to be guaranteeing damage on the opposing Annihilate? Or do you, again, get very brave and go for a Shadow Ball in the face of a redirection normal type?
Indeed, well, we see it's not going to be any moves coming out from that Dragonite. Just going to be a switch into the Dondozo coming out there. The Golden Go also switching out into Tatsugiri. We're getting that combination, no foreshadowing whatsoever. And Commander activates there. The Tatsugiri jumps into the mouth of Dondozo, starts telling it what to do, and the first order of business is going to be boosting all of its stats there. Quite interesting here. Maybe could see a double protect coming out here, but no, just the beat up there. Lee going straight on the offensive. Beat up with all 4 Pokemon left on Lee's side of the field is going to hit 4 times. That Rage Fist is now at 250 base power, but it goes into the wrong slot, and unfortunately for Lee, all of that damage falls afoul.
Absolutely, very, very good switch for David there. Correctly predicting that the Rage Fist would go into the Golden Go slot instead. It would have been a very risky play to go for it into the opposing Dragonite, given the fact that it could tear it into the normal type. But that would have been the correct target in this case. The Dondozo and Tatsugiri wasn't, at least the Dondozo wasn't brought to the previous game, so maybe he wasn't expecting that as a possible switch in, but being able to catch that very nicely with David there. The Rage Fist is still going to be very strong, and you can still now redirect and allow Annihilate to do its thing, but that was a very, very clever switch in from David.
It really was, and bulk up coming in from Lee's Annihilate, as well as that Follow Me, just making sure that nothing is able to attack into the Annihilate this turn. Attack boost coming out from Dondozo as well from that order up, and a little bit of leftovers recovery from the Annihilate. So, not a lot of damage coming out this time from Lee's side of the field onto David's, and not sure if that bulk up was really the right play.
Bulk Up's going to help you with the Dragonite in the back, but it's not particularly going to help you with the Dondozo at this point. Because you're not going to be able to take less damage because the Unaware will ignore the defense boost, and you're not going to be able to do more damage because it will ignore the attack boost as well. So maybe committing to this Annihilate to be able to win the rest of the game and getting ready for the Dragonite in the back. You're still going to be able to do significant damage with the Rage Fist because that part does ignore the defense boosts and the Unaware of the Dondozo. So you're still going to be able to do some very good damage here. The Mouse Hold is still going to be keeping the Annihilate safe because of the Friend Guard, but that curly form Tatsugiri going to give the attack boost to Dondozo. That's going to start snowballing with some very, very big damage.
And the Mouse Hold going for a Protect this turn, just making sure it's not taking any more damage. Oh my god! Critical hit coming out onto the Dondozo here. That Rage Fist, boosted by all of those beats up, is able to knock out the Dondozo in one. I thought it was going to stay on the field for a long time here, but unfortunately for David, going back to him.
Saying about ignoring the defense boost, a critical hit is one way to ignore the defense boost. And given that you've got such a strong Rage Fist at this point because you've been beaten up, then you're just going to be able to do so much damage. Yeah, that is a very unfortunate critical hit. But you got it in the game one against the Tyranitar as well, so somewhat even at this point. And I maybe think that might be a bit more impactful going into the Dondozo because you're relying on the defense boost to just be able to shrug off those attacks. The critical hit, just ignoring that completely, just invalidates that strategy because you just sacrificed all of these boosts. You committed to the boost with the Tatsugiri and now they're just not effective anymore because they were ignored completely. At least the Golden Go has now hit the field, so it's going to be able to once again threaten that Annihilate with the Shadow Balls. You can potentially knock out the Mouse Hold with the Choice Scarf Tatsugiri first, but if you do go for an attack that can KO the Mouse Hold this turn, then you're not going to be able to go for an Icy Wind to get the speed control to guarantee your Golden Go is going to outspeed the opposing Annihilate.
No, not at all. And one thing that this Annihilate is going to be is very, very dangerous. Going for its Terrafire there and really trying to stop that Make It Rain doing quite as much damage. Golden Go following suit, going for a Terra Steel of its own and increasing the power of that Make It Rain, which does imply what we're going to be seeing coming out here. Icy Wind coming in from that Tatsugiri because the Annihilate has been revealed to be rather speedy based on it going for Rage Fist before Dondozo was able to act. Make It Rain, though, is going to be resisted, of course, by that Annihilate as well as the Icy Wind. Going to be able to knock out the Mouse Hold, which is a little bit of progress for David here, but will allow a Rage Fist to come out onto David's side of the field. And you wouldn't be surprised if this easily knocks out that Golden Go.
Yeah, you've got the Bulk Up now. You've got that Defiant boost from the Icy Wind as well, so that's now at +2 stages of increased attack. With your activated Rage Fist going to be doing so much damage, that was easily going to be able to pick up the knockout on that opposing Golden Go. Maybe going for an offensive Terror with the Steel typing. Not really going to work as a defensive Terror when the Annihilate is going to be that strong and just going to be able to knock you out even without it being a super effective hit. And now the Tatsugiri is just locked into Icy Wind at this point because 2 Pokemon have been KO'd on David's side of the field. The Dragonite is going to be able to come back in and the Tyranitar has joined the field for Lee's side of the field, but now that Tatsugiri is locked into Icy Wind, you're going to be moving first, at least, but now you're going against a Tyranitar that was going to be moving last anyway, and an Annihilate that is now a Fire type, so you're not going to be able to do too much damage to it. At least it's now a Fire type instead of a Ghost type, so if you want to lock yourself into Extreme Speed with Dragonite, you can actually hit the opposing Annihilate. So yeah, it's still going to be very awkward for that Tatsugiri. Dragonite's going to have to be the Pokemon to rely on here. And again, there's no Dragon type resist on Lee's side of the field, so you can just lock yourself into that Outrage. It does have access to the Stone Edge as well, so if you want to be going for that super effective hit into the opposing Annihilate, that would be very impactful. But then you wouldn't be doing too much damage to the opposing Tyranitar, so maybe you do need to be locking into that Outrage once again, because that would hit both Pokemon for very good damage.
It would be. Nothing like that coming out from the start of the turn. We've got Icy Wind coming out from that Tatsugiri that it's locked into, and an Outrage again being locked into. I don't care if that Annihilate's got some Bulk Ups going on. It was about the sort of range that you'd expect it to be knocked out still, so not too much of a surprise, but it is going to be the Tyranitar that's replying with a Rock Slide. Critical hit, that explains it. Doing quite a lot of damage onto the Tatsugiri and breaking that multi-scale, of course, on the Dragonite. And Rotom will be the last Pokemon of choice for Lee.
Yeah, and you saw how impactful that multi-scale was. That was a super effective Rock Slide that turned into effectively a neutral hit, and now only a third of the Dragonite's HP is gone. Probably in range of a second Rock Slide at this point, so you probably do need to hope that the Outrage is going to be hitting into that Tyranitar, and with that extra little chip from the Icy Winds, maybe a critical hit won't be necessary this time, because if it does go into the opposing Rotom, then Rock Slide may be able to finish off this game here, and it looks like it is targeting that Rotom.
Yeah, that Rotom is going to be knocked straight out there, and going back to Lee. So much damage here. Rock Slide following up is going to be able to take a double knockout, and it's going to be Lee that takes game 2 of this set and taking us to a game 3.
Yeah, I think both of those games there was a very impactful critical hits. The Tyranitar in that first game and that Dondozo in the second game. Yeah, if you just bypass all the defense boost, then that's going to invalidate the strategy completely. The Annihilate, definitely the Pokemon that Lee wanted to be going for there. It basically cleared up most of the field on David's side of the field. Even though it wasn't able to finish off what it was trying to do, that allowed that Tyranitar to be able to finish off the game itself.
And so, going into game 3, Jamie, what are your thoughts in terms of how both of these players have adjusted? We've seen, a really commanding victory game 1 with that critical hit that may or may not have changed the board state enough to, secure a win on the spot. Game 2, definitely Lee had the advantage there with a critical hit that came out. So, aside from those sort of situations, Jamie, what are you looking for from both of these players going into game 3 to the decider?
Yeah, I think switching up to a strategy as such, as a combo between the Pokemon, the Mousehold and the Annihilate, was very effective, as we saw. The Annihilate was able to put on so much damage, and I think that going with Dondozo and Tatsugiri was also potentially going to be very effective for David. You might even consider leading it at this point, because you double switched on that first turn. That was an extra turn to allow the beat-up to happen to the Annihilate. If you lead with the Dondozo and Tatsugiri, it has to spend that extra turn while the Dondozo is already on the field going for that beat-up to enable that Annihilate to do the damage. So maybe that could be a potential switch-up for David, because Dondozo Tatsugiri seemed like it would be pretty reasonable in that game too. If it's into the correct position and avoids any of the critical hits, then it's still going to be able to do exactly what it wants to do.
And with no kind of water-type wave crash move coming out from the Dondozo on David's side of the field, it's like unlikely that we're going to see Gastrodon coming into the field and being able to redirect any moves from that Dondozo. We said it before, the Rotom was actually quite a good Pokemon into that position. And the Terra Fairy, I think, does make it quite interesting against that Dondozo, because maintains the Levitate ability but is immune to that order up as well, as being immune to the Outrage that David's used to such good effect in this set.
Yeah, it was very close if the Outrage would have taken the game. If that extra round of the 2 Icy Wind chips would have put the Tyranitar into range of that Outrage, if the Outrage had targeted the Tyranitar instead, that might have been a different game there. It would have been very close if it was able to KO. Given the fact that it OHKO'd an Annihilate, it'd be very close if it KO'd a Tyranitar that had taken a little bit of chip as well. So, yeah, the Rotom does seem like it would be very effective here, because that Dragonite is probably putting out the most amount of damage for David, even apart from the Dondozo. The Dondozo definitely could have done if it was able to have some more turns on the field, but the Dragonite has been consistently locking itself into Outrage. We often see it lock itself into Extreme Speed instead, and it commits to the Terra Normal instead. Hasn't had to do that in this game. It's just been clicking Outrage because there's no Dragon Resist on Lee's side of the field, unless that Rotom does go for the Terra Fairy.
Indeed. One of the last little bits that may be worth thinking about coming out here, and a tech that we haven't spoken about on Lee's team, is that Lycanroc has got that Focus Sash Endeavor and could bring a Pokemon down to 1 HP. We'll have to see if that's in the back for Lee. As we go into Game 3, Mousehold and Annihilate, Goldengo and Lilligant coming out for these trainers.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting mind game going into this first turn. We've already seen that David is willing to go for a Sleep Powder in the face of the Follow Me safety goggles. So, do you go for that again? Are you going to be brave enough to go for the Sleep Powder once again into the opposing Annihilate? Do you go for Follow Me, because now you know that David is willing to go for that Sleep Powder to get that guaranteed the Mousehold is going to take whatever attack the Lilligant would want to go for? Because if you don't go for the Follow Me, you get to go for Beat Up. You want to be beating up your Annihilate. If you're going for Follow Me, you don't get the damage output that turn. It has to bulk up. But it is just going to be a Beat Up here. There is no Follow Me.
No, none at all. Beat Up going to be hitting that Annihilate 4 times. Going to be going before the Lilligant as well, which is really nice. Population Bomb could have threatened the Lilligant, but unfortunately it's not quite as consistent as this Annihilate goes before the Lilligant and does pick up a clean KO on that Golden Go. No Terror to make it not, to make it resist or not be weak to the Ghost type Rage Fist, as Sleep Powder does indeed put Annihilate to sleep, but I kind of feel like Annihilate's done what it needed to do on turn 1.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very fast Annihilate. With the Focus Sash, Lilligants are usually run as fast as they can be, and Annihilate does actually match Lilligant for speed, so has to be run very fast to be able to match the Lilligant. Could potentially even be a speed type because Lilligants are usually run so fast. So the fact that the Annihilate was able to move first there, very, very important, because David again was once again willing to go for a Sleep Powder in the face of the Follow Me. So the fact that the Annihilate was able to move first, KO the Golden Go before it was able to move, very, very crucial here.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice way of controlling the game for David, saying like, okay, if you follow me, then you're not getting that beat up going. And I think that's an important way to think about the game. As we see the Terror Ghost come out from the Lilligant on David's side of the field. Mousehold just making sure that it's protecting itself, keeping that Friend Guard mechanic in play. And a Terror Blast coming out. That's not something that we spied from the team sheets. Oh my god, Terror Ghost coming out into this Annihilate is super effective. Doesn't pick up the KO, but gets fairly close to what looks like a 2-hit KO. And this Dragonite is like 3 for 3 now.
Yeah, the Outrage going to be targeting the Annihilate here. Could have just gone for the Mousehold, but very, very good for David there. The fact that it hit the Annihilate. Again, so brave from David. He's just been going for all the moves that would be doing nothing at all if the Mousehold just clicked Follow Me, and getting it right every single time. Going to be able to go for the Sleep Power into the Annihilate, going to be able to go for the Terror Blast into the Annihilate. The Mousehold could have made both of those moves redundant with the Sage Goals and the normal typing respectively, and instead has just been opting to go for the beat-ups, which was very effective in taking care of the Golden Go, but not going for the Follow Me on that turn. Losing the mind game once again, because it is definitely a mind game between them, because if you go for the Follow Me's, it's guaranteed that the Lilligant isn't going to be able to do anything, then the Mousehold itself isn't going to be doing anything either.
No, and I think one of the difficult things is that the Dragonite appears to be trained to be faster than the Lilligant on David's side of the field. I believe I saw that interaction right
The Lilligant
previously.
did attack with the Terror Blast first, so would be going for there. But the Population Bomb is still going to be quite effective. It breaks the Monster Scale with 1 hit, and then actually does some reasonable damage afterwards, especially because he's getting so many hits here.
Yeah, it's really quite impressive that Mousehold is going to be able to hit as many times as it does. A full 10 times there. Sleep Powder, though, going into the Rotom on Lee's side of the field, and let's see if this Dragonite does indeed. Yes,
Yep.
4 for 4 going into that Mousehold, knocking it out in 1. Mousehold did do quite a bit of work, though, there, just setting up that Dragonite, breaking a multi-scale, and actually doing probably a little bit more than Lee was expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. Without the Wide Lens, you don't often get all 10 hits, but getting it there and doing some significant damage. You can see how strong Mousehold can potentially be. If it had Technician, that might have actually been really close to knocking out the Dragonite there. So the Friend Guard's not quite going to be the ability of choice there for the Mousehold to be able to take out that Dragonite, but Dragonite's just been so spot on with these Outrages. Lilligant has been spot on with these Sleep Powders, because that is once again another sleeping Pokemon on the side of the field.
It is indeed. And
of
yeah,
course.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. We shouldn't be surprised at this stage. Does confirm that the critical hit was probably necessary on the game 1 when Tyranitar switched in previously, but Rotom does get a fairly early wake up and does go for that Thunderbolt into the Lilligant. Not quite enough to pick up the KO though, so Lilligant will be hanging on, but not for long because of those sand chips.
Yeah, it's probably got one more turn before it is going to be fating here, but the Tyranitar has been put so low here, it's got to be in range of a Leaf Storm, even with the Assault Vest and the Sandstream boost. The Dragonite has done so much damage. The Outrage has been spot on so far, and you are now switching out on David's side of the field. Dragonite's going to be able to reset. Doesn't want to be locked into Outrage against the opposing Rotom. That's here he can switch in here to be able to put on some offense pressure as well. And Leaf Storm into Tyranitar, going to be able to pick up the knockout there.
Yeah, nice easy KO there. Lilligant has to drop its special attack, but will be getting knocked out at the end of this turn to the Sand. That's going to allow for the Dragonite to come back in. It's going to be able to lock itself into a different move than Outrage. Thunderbolt doesn't quite manage to pick up the KO on the Tatsugiri that switches in either. So a little bit of a shame there from Lee's side of the field, just not quite having that offensive output that he needs to be able to break through David's team. And of course, this Tatsugiri coming in isn't going to be able to use any dragon moves either, but as long as it hits one of those muddy waters alongside any attack that the Dragonite comes in with, it's probably going to be David that takes the win in this set.
Yeah, Tatsugiri does have to lock into an inaccurate move here, so there is still definitely a chance for Lee. The moves from Tatsugiri do miss. Doesn't seem to be anything on the Dragonite's moveset that would just knock out the Rotom in one shot because of the fact they can't go for the Terra Normal. Here is the Extreme Speed, still very strong, is going to be a two-hit knockout, but did need the combination of that Muddy Water there that did end up connecting with that single target, is going to be able to KO that Rotom and take the set for David.
Yeah, a really well played set there by both players. I really liked the way that David managed all of the Pokemon on his side of the field that carried those choice items. It didn't seem like it was ever a problem that David couldn't switch moves, because he could always just switch out Pokemon or just rely on that Outrage going into the slot that he wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. The Lilligant and Dragonite both very well trained there. All the Sleep Powders connected, all the Outrages hitting the perfect slot. Very, very effective coming out there. You can see how the high-risk, high-reward strategies can be. If you get the correct side of it, with the Sleep Powders connecting, with the Outrage connecting with the correct target, it can be very effective, as we've just seen David be able to take that game very comfortably at the end. So, yeah, it's interesting to see the choice of team building there, because we could have just gone for Dragon Claw instead of Outrage. That would not have been strong enough in that game. That wouldn't have been able to pick up the knockouts. We saw it with Oko and Annihilate almost take out a Tyranitar, did with a critical hit, and yeah, the Dragon Claw wouldn't have been enough. So the high risk, high reward really paying off for David there.
Really did, and actually something that I want to call out here is the choice to target. We spoke about this already in the game, but the choice of David to go for those Sleep Powders to deny Lee the option of doing really whatever he wanted with that Annihilate. You know, you go for a Sleep Powder into the Rotom slot, as it did a couple of times in that set. Well, if the mouse hold redirects it, then it's not getting that beat up going, and it's not. And the Rotom may be free to get an attack off, but actually, it makes sure that the Golden Go or any of the other Pokemon on David's side of the field get to do what they want to do.
Yeah, it definitely isn't as simple as just, I will follow me in the front of this Sleep Powder, and that's it. Because like you said, if you are going for follow me, you are not going for beat up, and Annihilate is not going to be as strong as it could be. If you're not going for beat up, it kind of has to bulk up before it is able to do enough damage. And when you get the beat up off, Rage Fist is suddenly just OHKOing a lot of Pokemon as well. So yeah, it's still definitely a mind game, but it's also, I am forcing you to follow me to make the mouse hold not go for beat up.
Yeah, exactly that. And we will be able to hear that from the player themselves. David is going to be joining us for an interview. We're going to be going to a short break now, but we'll be back with David Koutesh, the winner of round 2.
Welcome back to the interview with the winner of that previous round 2, David Koutesh. Welcome to the stage. That was a fantastic game. How are you feeling going up against Lee?
I mean, like, I know him as a player, and like, whenever I know someone's name, I already just like have a different mindset. Like, usually you can expect them to make more advanced plays, and so yeah, that's that.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of advanced plays, that Lilligant just completely ignoring that mouse hold. It had the safety goggles, it had the normal typing, and you were just going for the Sleep Powders without any fear. You were going with the Terra Blasters without any fear. What was your thought process behind going for those moves with the Lilligant?
Well, usually, like, let's just take it from an easier standpoint. Like, if they lead Annihilate, and like I lead, for example, Golden Ego, it's like, yeah, I gotta beat that Annihilate Bob, so it deals more damage throughout the game. So it's relatively safe to go for a Sleep Powder there. And whenever you see like a Far type next to Safety Goggles Manzolt, the opponent might as well say, all right, let's just get like extra damage coming into the next place. There's like low chance of me going for a Sleep Powder anyways, so I'm going to protect. And then, like if I, for example, go for the Leaf Storm, I'll have to wait additional turn to Sleep Powder, which could be absolutely horrible for me. So I just kind of like said, all right, this is like clever play what opponent could do, so let me just try to Sleep Powder the Rotom Heat, for example, game 1, and it worked out.
Yeah, it absolutely worked out, and Lilligant itself was working out. Didn't come with the Torkoal. Like, that is a Pokemon you usually want to be going, maybe even Lilligant Torkoal as a lead. Torkoal wasn't even brought to the match. So what was your reasoning behind bringing Lilligant even without the Sun?
So usually if I face up against like a bulky offense team, usually like Lilligant's speed is enough even without his Sun. And Golden Echo, let's just say it hits a bit harder than Torkoal, and with like a better defensive typing, better speed, it does like everything better. So usually I can just go for sleep powders anyways and just go for about the same speed, make it rain. Sometimes Golden Echo even outspeeds naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting seeing the speeds there as well, because the Annihilate was actually moving first before the Lilligant. That was reasonably unexpected, but then the Lilligant was able to put on a lot of pressure as well. You did actually end up switching to Dondozo in that game too, and then left it on the bench in that game 3. What made you decide to switch up for the Dondozo in that game 2?
So basically, I just felt like I had a bit of an advantage coming into game 2, so I decided, like, let's try Dondozo. Like, it doesn't have a horrible matchup. Like if even a Rotom Heat, I can technically order up or Terra Blast depending on what it Terra Slices into. And, like, the Annihilate matchup is, like, good because, like, I ignore the... I mean, I got +2 defense, I got very naturally high defense, and, well, I ignore the bulk up boosts, but that didn't entirely work out to game 2. And I was a bit too scared to bring it to game 3. I don't know, it was a bit paranoid, like crit could happen again. So
yeah, that was an unfortunate critical hit. Like you said, it would have ignored the bulk up boost, so would have been quite effective there, but unfortunate for the Dondozo. And that Dragonite as well, just being absolutely spot on with its outrages. What was your reason behind using outrage instead of maybe something more consistent like Dragon Claw?
Like, the extra power is absolutely necessary in a lot of the cases. Like, I mean, normally I just go for extreme speeds and they're like, okay, power, like Dragon Claw is only 50% more powerful, but like Outrage is more than 2 times as powerful than extreme speed, and that's something what you could consider. Yeah, I got a bit lucky, but like, for example, if someone follows me, I can just relatively easily and consistently target them with Outrage and just one-shot them. Indeed, female and Mazel do not have a very high physical bulk, so I can definitely capitalize on that in these situations.
Absolutely, it was very, very effective in this game for sure. You had such an impressive season last season, culminating in that top 16 at the World Championships. How are you feeling going into this format? What are your plans going into this season?
So I'm planning to like basically go to almost every European regional and international. It's just kind of a habit right now. So yeah, I'm planning on that. Don't know for sure what's going to be my plans. If I make Worlds, I'm definitely going to come to Worlds, but we'll see about that. Like, Pokemon is a game, you know.
Yeah,
one of these games.
Absolutely. Absolutely, one of these games. So just to conclude this, do you have any final shout-outs or any shout-outs you want to give to anyone?
Well, I just kind of mostly prepare for this tournament myself, but I'm just going to probably shout out my mother for coming here with me. So she's always a great support to me, so yeah.
That's brilliant to hear, absolutely. So congratulations once again, winning this round 2. Good luck going into the next rounds. We are going to be cutting to a short break, and we'll be right back with the action for round 3.